Live. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Catholic Family Podcast. I'm Dan Davis, your guest host today. And today we have a really cool story, conversion story with Martha, the Zealot Renner, now the Sede Renner. So,
That's
Martha, I
right.
want to
That's right.
welcome you aboard.
Thank you. Thank you
So,
for having me, Dan.
yep. So I got to tell a quick story here. So I've been on Twitter now for I think about 8 years or so, and I'm guessing you've been on one for what, 6 years, something like that.
Right. 5, maybe.
Yeah. So your name first came up, and I saw Martha the Zealot, and I didn't know anything about you. I didn't know who you were, what your position was, or anything like that. But my very first thought is, we are going to be friends, because I love that Martha the Zealot, and I think everybody I talked to that was such an awesome name to pick for Twitter. But I know you've gone through a spiritual journey of your own and a conversion now to the true faith. And I want to kind of just open it up and let you tell your story.
All right. Well, thanks, Dan. So I think the first half of my story is pretty typical. I was raised Novus Ordo, and what does that mean? Well, that means not really knowing what the church is, not really knowing what she teaches, but getting that kind of rudimentary education. We prayed the rosary at school sometimes. I went to a parochial school, and my family was conservative in the sense that we went to mass on every Sunday and Holy Day, but I didn't know much about the faith. And then I met my boyfriend, who I later married, and he was Lutheran. That was a good point of growth for me because we'd argue, and he'd come over to my church and say, "Hey, this is just the same as what we're doing at mine." I'd go over to his, and I had to admit it looked pretty similar, but I kept arguing, no, they're totally different. That was a nice first jumping point for me, though, because I studied Catholicism, I studied Lutheranism, and learned a lot about my faith that I wouldn't have otherwise. So fast forward, we got married with a dispensation in the Novus Ordo. He was still Lutheran. And as a matter of fact, he didn't convert until 15 years into our marriage. I know. And I thought that was like my great success, was that I got him into the RCIA program. So he had been attending with me for many years, probably 10 years, just didn't convert because he didn't see the point. And he finally did convert, and we started going along. This was 2011. And then the next year in 2012, we accidentally happened upon the diocese's indult Latin Mass. And it was, I say happened upon because we didn't know what the indult Mass was. We only went because of the time. It was 11:30, and we had 7 young kids at the time, and mornings aren't good. So we said we'd been to a Spanish Mass before. We thought, well, it's just, I don't know, they'll say Latin here or there or something. And so we go, and it was, I probably don't need to tell you, very shocking.
Right.
But in a good way. My husband, his name is also Dan, is a big history buff, and he thought it was great. And as we were walking out of church, the kids were confused. What was with the sitting and the kneeling and the standing and the kneeling I said, I don't know. And we walked out, and he was saying, "Gee, now, if that had been the church you were going to, I could have said, yeah, I see a difference."
Well.
So, and we were accosted outside. I always get a laugh at the people on Twitter who say that trads are so unwelcoming and unfriendly, because every even indult trad I've met is so friendly. They will like practically jump on the hood of your car as you try to pull out if you didn't say hello. So we were new, and so here come the parishioners to introduce themselves and ask us our names and where have you been going to mass and all this. And two brothers who are crucial to my story also take me aside, and this is the next town over, so they knew my family, and they said, "Martha, you have to read all this stuff. So much has happened." And they run to their car and they grab a stack of books, like 10 books, and the usual suspects in the R&R crowd, like the Alta Vendita, Liturgical Time Bombs, Michael Davies. I think I got Iota Unum. Wow, lots of books. Anyway, all red pill books, Solange Hertz, if you've ever heard of her. And I think she might be a Feeneyite.
Oh,
which
wow.
is interesting. But
Right.
they gave me all these books. And so I'm kind of studious. I like to learn. I like to plumb the depths of everything I don't know. So I got home and started reading, and it was just revelation after revelation after revelation. And it was funny because before that Sunday, I didn't know that anything existed other than the Novus Ordo. I thought the church was the Novus Ordo and always had been. I remember my parents taking me to a polka mass once, and I thought that that was traditional. You
Wow.
know, oh, is this what you did in the old country? You know, anyway, so I start reading and studying, and every 5 minutes I'm yelling to Dan, "Oh, you have to hear this! Listen, listen, listen!" And it covered all the bases, Freemasonry and infiltration of modernists and all sorts of things. And I was raised John Birch, and so
Okay.
we had an unhealthy admiration for America and the founding fathers,
Hmm.
which was a big red pill for me too. But the nice thing about, I think, being raised in the John Birch Society was that you question things.
Hmm.
You assume conspiracies. You're always looking for the ulterior motives, and you don't trust government officials and things. You're like,
Right.
well, there's and then I thought too, the New World Order, uh, and they named this the new mass, the new order of mass. Like,
Right.
wow. So that weeks and months went by, and I read and I read and I read. And ultimately that brought me to set of a contest stuff on the internet. I mean, how could you not? I come
Hmm.
across Father Cicada. I came across some Fatima conferences, and I thought, well, this is the answer to this puzzle. And so a few months had gone by, and I came to these brothers who gave me all the books at church that Sunday, and I said, "This is the answer, though, Father Chicada and blah blah blah." And they just this look on their face, like, no,
Mm. Right.
I stop you right there. Friends don't let friends
Go Sadie.
go city. Yeah. so so they start, Martha, you got to listen to me. This is dangerous. This is from the devil. He's going to try to fool you. Don't even look at it, please. I'm begging you. And I had a lot of respect for these guys at this moment, sadly. And so I went home and I did watch a couple more videos, and they were so good. They were so compelling. I was like, wow, but everything would make sense. And I remember forcing myself to stop. I'm like, no, I'm gonna stop because he's right. I'm getting sucked in. It's the forked devil tongue of lies is so
Hmm.
convincing, right? So so I stopped watching and spent the next 7 years in the indult. And the indult is a place. I don't know if any of the viewers are there or have been there, but the indult is an ugly place. It's it's got all the beauties of Catholicism, but it's not about Catholicism. It's about fighting. It's about I spent the next 7 years writing petitions and being angry in what I thought was righteous anger, and arguing with the priests and arguing with the bishop, arguing with who I thought was the legitimate authorities.
Hmm.
And we'd go home from church and we'd be yelling about what was said in the homily because the priest was just assigned to the parish. He was forced to learn the Latin Mass because people requested it, as per Summorum Pontificum. So his heart wasn't in it, and he didn't like it. And so his homilies always talked about the glories of Vatican II and the beautifulness of John Paul II and all these things. And in mind, I had already rejected all of these things as Vatican II is evil. These popes were terrible, terrible, evil popes. But I was fully recognize and resist. I thought that that was what Catholics do. I was Michael Matt's greatest disciple, I think.
Hmm.
Had the remnant, that was my that was my Bible, and and just fought, and giving the kids a terrible example. Because, like I was saying, we'd come home from church, and we'd be talking about how horrible the homily was. Well, kids, don't listen to that priest. This is terrible and that was terrible, and uh, so it was just a really negative air of disobedience, anger, um, cutting down authority, telling the kids over and over how you can reject the Pope, reject. Oh wow, it was so Protestant. And I didn't realize it. I thought, I'm fighting the good fight. I'm doing what I should. And I see this on Twitter from people too, even now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, there was one thing I saw on Twitter, and I won't say her name, but she mentioned that she'd love to commission a painting of Our Lady holding the infant Jesus, and with the other hand, having a club with which she was beating the Pope. And I thought,
Yeah.
I would have laughed at that probably 3 or 4 years ago. And now I'm just
Mm-hmm.
horrified at
Right.
what the devil's been able to accomplish with people. So I spent these 7 years in the indult, like I said, arguing, fighting. We had group meetings. We had our little clubs we formed. We were going to reform this and fight that. It was like Guy Fawkes planning to bomb the Vatican or something.
Right.
And so finally, and I'm on Twitter. I joined Twitter to follow Hillary White. Hillary White, Steve Skojak, these are my kind of people, right?
Right.
And so I started my handle I chose because my brother called me a zealot once in a negative way. Because I scolded him for going to the Novus Ordo, and he said, "You're such a zealot." I said, "Thank you."
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I get on Twitter and think I'm just going to follow other who I think are Latin masters, people like me, R&R people. And so I'm collecting my group of people, and settings do pop on. And my first experiences, I realized later, were Feniites, because I'd say something. I didn't know any better. I'd say something stupid about the Pope, or we've got to fight, or this and that. And they'd pop on and say, "You're a heretic. You're going to hell." And obviously that's not the best approach. And I'd kind of recoil and say, "No, I'm going to
Right.
block
Yeah.
you." Right. So I encountered those at first. Then after a while, Colleen popped up and she floated around. You were in there, and Ryan. And it's funny, I have to stop to tell this story. In researching for this podcast, I wanted to find the tweet, because there was an epiphany tweet for me, a eureka tweet. And it was one that you sent. And it was one that changed my whole course. And I thought, I remember when Dan wrote this, I was going on about heretic popes and how we have to fight them. And you always had such a great Catholic bedside manner. You said something like, and always answering a question with a question, something like, "Oh, really? I wonder if the popes would agree with you, or I wonder if Vatican I." And you posted a little something, and it was from Vatican I about submission to the Pope. And that rocked my world. And I wanted to find that for this podcast. And I was really upset at myself, because when I looked, I thought that had to be about November 2019, because that's when I got serious about looking into it. But my interactions with you went several years before that.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. And I'm
Well, and
like,
we chatted about nothing, and everything, and yeah, it was great.
Well, and I think you try to gently say something or steer me in a direction, and I think I totally missed your point. I think it just went right over my head, because I'd say something and you'd say, "Yeah, we shouldn't resist a pope, or a pope, something about a pope not being bad." And I'm like, "Yeah, totally." Like, I don't know what you meant. But anyway, so the beginning of it was that November 19, you and I said something nasty about the Pope. And all you did was post a quote, something, could have been Leo the 13th, could have been Pius the 10th. I don't even remember what it was. I wanted to find it. And I read because I was great at the ex cathedra. You has to meet these 3 things, or what the Pope says can completely be ignored. I didn't know about the universal ordinary magisterium or anything like that. And your quote blew that up. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And I went online and I looked it up right on the Vatican site. There it was. And I just had this revolution and started searching and searching and searching, and found all these papal quotes. And it just, I don't know if I hadn't seen those quotes before, or if I just was finally open to it, but it blew my world apart that you had to submit to the Pope in everything, and not just in all matters of faith and morals. And I remember a Novus Ordo friend arguing that with me. She was talking about something great that she thought Pope Francis was great. Oh, and I said, nah, ex cathedra, sorry. And she said, "No, all matters of faith and morals. And ironically, she was right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I started studying. That was my revolution, and started asking people things. And I immediately made a private chat with you and Ryan and Colleen, because you were the three people who were unfailingly charitable, always wanted to answer questions and not just point fingers and say, you are and our people are so evil and diabolical.
Right,
And,
right.
which is something I've had a hard time emulating. I'm a little fiery, and I'm not so good at being assuming the best of people. But I've gotten burned a few times too. And I'm sure you
Right.
have as well.
Well, yeah, and I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I guarantee whatever problems you've had, I've had worse way back when. It's been a long journey for me as well to learn that kind of whatever you call it, evangelizing, proselytizing, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, so you now you're in a position where you're considering sedevacantism, and you're still in the R&R. And I have to ask the question because I know the answer here, but go ahead. Where did it go from there?
Well, studying, reading things, asking all the stupid questions. And then you said, why don't you get in touch with a Sede priest? He can answer these questions better than I can. And I said, I'm in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around me. I even looked for mass centers. There's nothing around me. And so you said, well, why don't you talk to Father Borja? And before I knew it, he was DMing me on Twitter. And I was thinking, meanwhile, what am I getting into? And so I got a message from him, and he said, well, where do you live? And I posted a screenshot of where I live. And he wrote back and said, I drive right by your house every day, within a mile and a half. I've driven this route for years and years. I've driven right by your house on my way from Omaha to St. Cloud. You're right on my route. So why don't I stop in? So now I got to, meanwhile, I should pause and say, meanwhile, immediately I presented it to my husband. I said, we should listen to some of this stuff. Help me figure this out. And our older kids were just 20 at the time. And so we involved them too. And we'd sit at night and listen to podcasts, a lot of Bishop Pivarunis or Father Chicada, the Fatima conferences, or I'd read something, Nova Sort of watch. But we listen to all sorts of things. Every night we'd listen to an hour or 2 hour podcast or YouTube thing. Because I thought, well, if those brothers at the Latin Mass were right at the indult, I don't want to be led astray. So I'm going to use all of you as my sounding boards, and we're going to figure this out together, which was in retrospect a really great move, because then we all progressed together, rather than I see so many times someone will by themselves find the truth and then have a really hard time convincing someone else.
Right.
So we started studying and watching and reading, and everyone was, and funnily enough, I was the most hesitant of anyone. And looking back, I mean, I think it's the feminine emotionalism, not as much logic, because my husband right away was, well, ABC. Why are you even still listening to these? And I was like, well, and I was like, but my friends and that one priest I really love, and I was all caught up in the fear of just fear and respect of man. That was really my big hangups. And so back to Father Borja. Then he DMs me. He's like, yeah, I'm coming up on Friday. I'll be there at 3 or whatever. So I tell everybody, okay, so this Sunday priest is coming. And at this point, I'd never met anyone actually traditional Catholic. And it was like almost like a boogeyman thing. Like is he going to be weird? What's he going to be like? And I was pleasantly surprised, as you imagine. Father Borja was charity itself, and so kind and so patient, and he didn't even come and sit down and say, so let's talk religion. Nah, he sat down and had some cookies, and we just hung out, and he just talked. I think we talked about his dog. He brought his dog, and and so I think he ended up stopping maybe 4 or 5 times, and each time we'd ask more questions, and he'd give us a little more information, and he was always so gentle about it, and in his unassuming way. very humble, and really helped us through all the questions we had and gave us more booklets and whatever to read.
Mhm.
And I think it took us, he started coming maybe early February, and by the end of February, we all went to up to St. Cloud for our general confessions. And then we're confirmed in May. And
Wow.
it was really great. And a lot of people were involved. And so the fallout, now I have to talk about the fallout because as we were talking before the show, I see my life, my faith life in three distinct portions. I see my Novus Ordo upbringing and my adulthood in the Novus Ordo, which I would be what you'd call a conservative Novus Ordo. We always went to Mass. We occasionally prayed the Rosary. We had a big family and we homeschooled. So we were trying to follow what we thought were the church's rules. But basically, ignorance and blissful ignorance. Church life didn't really have a bearing on our home life. We were mostly just secular. Whatever's on the radio, you listen to it. Whatever's on TV, you watched it.
Mhm.
Just, people call it Sunday Catholics, right? A
Right.
Sunday Catholic. Then, so ignorance, just not really living our faith. Then the indult portion, which was definitely marked by some spiritual growth, because we did learn things about the faith. But everything we learned just made us bitter and angry about what was stolen from us by the evil modernists. And you could still, yes, you could still say that, but I look at it differently now because that period was so marked by, and I'm afraid that we did some damage to the kids. It's been largely repaired, but it was so negative. It was toxic. It
Mhm.
was bashing authority. Disobedience is the answer. It's the way. We have to be revolutionaries. We have to revolt like the
Mhm.
Protestants, right?
Right.
And we weren't growing spiritually because we were just spending our time stewing in our own, what we thought was our righteousness.
Mhm.
And I see that on Twitter too. And it's no wonder people will say, "Oh, trad Twitter is so toxic." R&R trad Twitter is toxic.
It is. It is. Yeah.
The studies aren't, and it's kind of funny because
Mhm.
sometimes we'll fly off the handle because like you explain and explain and explain, and I should be more patient because I was there. Uh, but I think the studies maybe get tired and worn out. But that R&R position is so bad. It is just Protestant, and it's funny because the longer I've been awake, let's say, to the evils of it, the more obvious it's more and more until it's so blatant. I can't believe I didn't see it. And I can't
Mhm.
believe I can't get it through to people. But like they say, it's not so much a matter of knowledge as it is a matter of grace.
Right.
And I did so much praying during that period of time, during my struggle to learn the truth. I remember
Mhm.
praying to Mary and saying, I did a novena to her under the title Destroyer of Heresies. And I remember just begging her, like, Mary, I'm the zealot. I have to zealot.
Mhm.
If I'm going to do this, I have to feel 100%. I have to feel just absolutely solid on this. And it was really funny because on about day 7, it just like I had it and I
Mhm.
realized what my hangups were. But so then the third period of my life is traditional Catholicism. And uh, people will accuse me, R&R people will accuse me of having despaired or going with my emotions, quit the fight. And I'm
Mhm.
like, well, yes, I quit the illegitimate fight. I picked up the real
Right.
fight, right? Which is against Satan and all of his
Mhm.
works. And this period of my life has been marked by peace, just absolute peace. And you see everything for what it is, and everything finally makes sense. And you don't have to fight, and you don't have to bash, and you're still angry about what has happened, but in the same way that I'm angry about Luther, in the same way that I'm angry about the Methodists or the Baptists,
Mhm.
not as though I'm rebelling against my mother, and I see that the church never did leave. She's always been here. She stayed while, what do you want to say? She was eclipsed by the modernists, or I like some of my family has said, you've strayed, it's Catholicism and you just took off. And I said, no, No, I stayed. They stayed the course. You know, when I hear Bishop Pivarunas talk about his father and what they had to go through when the changes happened,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was absolutely a grace, because where would we be without people like that who had to say, wow, you're wrong. You guys just veered off, and we're staying the course. We're not veering off with you. That's heretical. You know, so this period of my life has been peace and spiritual growth, and priests who actually push me. You know, they'll chastise you if you don't, you know, better yourself. Are
Mm-hmm.
you and things I'd never even been told before. Things I'm ashamed to say I didn't even know existed. Uh, Morning prayers, night
No,
prayers.
right, right.
Yeah. Uh, all sorts of things that, you know, and then of course all the things, the Ember Days and fasting. And I mean, as a Nova Sordoite, we never did meatless Fridays ever.
Mm-hmm.
Lent, just Lent.
Just
And
Lent,
oh,
right.
that's yeah, really hard, right? Nothing else, just that. And then R&R, I remember looking at the calendar for Easter thinking, wow, people used to have to fast all of Lent. Can you imagine? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and you'd try it maybe a day or two just for kicks, but now it's a reality. Now it's you must under pain of sin, and it
Mm-hmm.
forces you to grow. And that's what the church is there for, right? Like a parent, I'm not suggesting things, I'm telling you things, and these are for your own good.
Right.
You need to do this to grow.
Yeah, the word I like to use a lot is yoke, yoke, in the sense that to the extent that we yoke ourselves to the church's teachings, to the disciplines of the church, and all that. I mean, it's almost inevitable that we're going to have spiritual fruit come out of that when we yoke ourselves to this modernist whatever it is. I mean, the to Francis and the rest. Even if we're trying to defeat it, we're trying to hate it, we're trying to do whatever, we're still yoked to it. It just tends to bring about misery, I think.
Absolutely, because it's not the truth, it's lies. It's and frankly, I believe that's the chastisement. Everyone keeps saying on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
this bad pope, putting up with our bad popes, that's the chastisement. We've earned this. I'm like, no, the chastisement is that it's those men aren't the church. And we're
Mm-hmm.
not people in the Novus Ordo paradigm, and the adults in it too, the FSSP and the ICK and all those, they're just, what did Father Cicada say? They're different flavors in the ice cream shop.
Right.
Uh, all of those paradigms do not give grace. They've rebelled from God, and they're preaching heresies. And that's the chastisement, is that the graces are not flowing so freely, and thus as goes the church, so goes the world, right? And so people recognize it as the church. They're still doing all of these things, and they're not able to thrive at all. They're being poisoned, and
Right.
they're falling away, and it's far reaching to, wow, I think the whole world. I think what we're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing today is all because of the modernist takeover and just the lack of graces in the world today.
Oh, absolutely. So take yourself back to the two young men who gave you the so nice, and gave you the kind of put you on a good path, gave you all the books, everything with R&R. If you could see them today, what would you say to them?
I do see them today.
Do you see them today? Oh, good.
Yes,
What do you say to them?
absolutely. Well, one of them is very of the opinion that I'm correct, and he'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm a Sedevacantist, yeah, yeah," and he'll admit that I'm right, but he continues to go to the indult, and I'll say, "What are you doing?"
Mhm.
And then yeah, jurisdiction. I don't know. He comes up with some theory that, and again, that's respect of man, because he feels, I believe, beholden to a priest that he helped learn the Latin Mass and got started and kind of has been doing it undercover. So he
Mhm.
thinks that this is great. And I'll say, but is he even a priest? And he just shirks. But the other one thinks I've gone off the deep end. He's the one that was really vociferous against me
Mm.
studying it. And he thinks that I'm just, I've gone off the deep end, and I'm a heretic now. And he has some weird theory, because he'll say, yeah, yeah, no. no, Francis isn't the Pope. It almost reminds me of the thesis because he'll
Yeah.
say
In
something
some regards,
like,
he is. In some regards, yeah, he isn't.
he has authority to do this and that. But more so, more Novus Ordo, because he thinks, well, but he has the authority to do this and that. He just doesn't have this authority. He has that authority. And I said, I think he has the authority to choose where you can park in the Vatican parking lot. I think he has that
Right.
authority. But other than that, not so much.
Right. Right. So we did a podcast, I think 2 or 3 months ago now, on the whole concept of sanity. And sanity is basically seeing the world as it is. Insanity being basically alternate types of realities. Do you feel like you've kind of gone down that road and kind of gotten to where real sanity is at this point?
Absolutely. And that's a great way to put it. I
Hmm.
think I was insane. I think I was out of my mind. And what's another word for insane? It's mad, right?
Right. Right.
I don't know if you want to take that literally, being angry, but I certainly was. That
Hmm.
was that was what marked my personality. I think my personality has changed because I was just angry all the time. When you're consuming the remnant all day long, and uh, other R&Rs, it's so funny. My son, who was 20 at the time, when I was so shocked, and I said, "But Michael, Matt never said anything about this. He never had any of these papal quotes. What about all the submission that's due and how we're supposed to love our Holy Father and how he's the vicar of Christ?" And he said to me, "Mom, he's a newspaper editor.
Hmm.
Why were you giving him credibility like he was some sort of a theological guru?" And him and Christopher Ferrara, and he's like, "These
Right.
people they're just laymen. He just happens to have a platform because he publishes a paper." He
Hmm.
said, "What?" And I still at that point I was saying, "But he seems like such a good guy. I mean, he's either," and I came down to, he's either lying or he's uh been fooled as well. And I thought, gosh, he can't hardly be. He studied so much, or he's insane. I don't
Hmm.
know. But that's a good point. The world has gone insane. And just like with the COVID stuff too.
Hmm.
Sometimes things that are so obvious aren't obvious. And I can look back at myself 5 years ago and say, these things that are so blatantly obvious. And I remember you
Right.
presenting me arguments in some of the old tweets. I couldn't understand you.
Hmm. So you're still active on Twitter, as am I. I kind of come and go. I'll try to probably give it up for Lent and whatnot. How do we reach out? How do we, because Twitter especially, and I think all social media, Twitter especially, is really designed to create conflict, to get people at each other's throats and whatnot. And yet we know that we're trying to save people from that kind of mindset, that kind of world. How do we do that?
Well, I think your example has been a great one
Well, thanks.
because I also think Twitter, it is designed to get everyone at each other's throats. It really is. But at the same time, if you can be that voice of charity and calmness, even when you think you're not getting through, you're planting the little seeds, right? And in
Hmm.
God's time, it will bear fruit. And I feel like, I've always been a bit of a Luddite in with technology. I hate technology. I wish we didn't have, I keep running water, but I wish
Yeah,
that
right.
we wouldn't have computers and the internet. It seems like it's just this big ball of evil and it's just constantly fighting to keep your kids safe. But God has certainly used it as a platform to
Hmm.
spread knowledge and spread the faith. And I think I've known quite a few people on Twitter who have come to the faith through Twitter. So it's not a hopeless cause. I just think we need to all take your approach, a little more kindness, a little more charity, a little more patience. And it is wearing. That's why I think you do need breaks and you can't be on there all the
Hmm.
time. And I think you can't single-handedly think, oh, I'm going to save the world because,
Right. You're not.
it's arguments, beautiful arguments will only take you so far. But I think
Hmm.
without your witness of being kind and charitable, and without Colleen, I called her the cheerleader. I remember
Hmm.
back in the day when I think it was before I was discerning. She was kind of like the annoying cheerleader. She was always there popping up,
Hmm.
going, "Hey, instead of a Conte? And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever, you know.
Mhm.
But she was nice about it. She
Mhm.
was kind of niggle you, but with a smile. And Ryan was the same way too. He was just calm and kind and never said anything mean. And I think that
He was faking it, Bill.
he was making
And I'm hoping Ryan watches this because he's a hothead, and I think that and he's self-professed
it.
that way.
Well,
But he
he's
did have a great
redheaded and an Irishman. So I
right.
mean, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, no, and he had a great online persona while he was there. But yeah, a really good guy. So you now are it's such a great story that you're in Minnesota, the southern part of Minnesota, and it just so happens that the Omaha parish priests are servicing the St. Cloud, what used to be St. Cloud is now Sartell.
Sartell. Yeah.
Yeah, every week. Are they still coming by? And I think you've had the bishop out. You've had a number of
Oh yeah.
priests out, haven't you?
Oh, many times. Yes, we had this Sunday a few days ago. Yesterday, is it Monday? Yesterday we had Father Molina, and the week before it was Bishop Pivrunas.
Hmm.
Yep. So whoever is on their way by just stops in. We every Sunday we have mass. Yeah.
Wow. So you set up a special room for mass,
Yeah.
and yeah. Any great stories about the priests coming down and visiting on Sundays?
Oh, there have been so many. And they're I'm glad they're all so young because they're just
Hmm.
absolutely vibrant. They drive and
Hmm.
drive and drive, and they're always just on top of their game. And
Wow.
you know, uh, there's just no lack of energy with them and no lack of charity. And I've had several priests who will come from, they do the route where they go St. Cloud and then Seneca, which is in
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And then they'll come here too.
Wow.
And I always say, Father, you don't want to do that, do you? And oh, yeah, yeah, they do. My favorite story with that is Father Sandquist came and he got here late because he had been at Seneca. So I think he got here at 6 or 7 at night. And we have mass and we have supper and we chat. And then someone started getting into music. I had no idea how much he loved
Oh, he loves music.
music. And pretty soon he's leading us in quartets by the piano. Oh, we're going to do the 4-part and you do this and you do this. It was much fun. And I don't think he left till midnight to
Wow.
get back to Omaha. And it's a 4.5 hour drive, 4 for sure, from here to
Mhm.
Omaha.
Wow.
So absolutely insane. But they're just they're just such holy men. And it's been amazing for our kids to meet them and see them. And because when we were first converting, one of my biggest regrets was how I felt like I had destroyed their respect for the priesthood. I had destroyed their respect for authority and obedience and submission through behavior at the time we didn't even consider. We
Mhm.
just, well, Father just said, uh, whatever, women should be priests. And so now we have to obviously just, destroy this argument. But in doing so, you kind of obviously knock down the priest, right?
Right.
So that was one of my biggest fears and regrets. And the CMRI priests have been, I mean, all the kids love them and they're just also holy and we get the best homilies and
Hmm.
not that that matters, but they just exude holiness, all of them.
Hmm.
And it's so great to be around them. It's been a huge blessing. And
Yeah.
I don't feel worthy of it. And I don't know what caused it, but I'm ever thankful for you and all the people who came into my life at the right moments that moved the world for us.
Right. So what do you set? I mean, do you set goals for yourself the coming year, or where do you feel like you go from here now that you've gone through such an amazing journey, and now you're here? But we know as Catholics we keep moving forward. We keep
Oh
we
yeah,
keep where do you see yourself going next?
that's a good question. Well, spiritually speaking, we're still baby Catholics, I feel like, and we're still trying to make good habits. So we're still trying to, teach the kids to always, when you wake up, do those morning prayers. Let's do your morning prayers. The nighttime prayers, the Angelus, which my bells went off here a little while ago. I
Yeah.
have to set an alarm so I remember because this isn't something that was ever programmed into my life. And so, just all of the little Catholic things that we're trying to learn about and make sure we always do. So we've got the Ember Days down, and the Catholic faith is so rich,
Right.
and so deep and so wide. There's always something you can be celebrating, some
Mhm.
novena you can be praying. So on the spiritual side, and our home life too, just because we lived kind of a secular life for so long, trying to ease into and make changes that are sustainable and we're going to um, do moving forward, and actually having certain kids completely raised that way, to say, yeah, we need to do this, we need to do that. It's funny because we're dressing as a woman. I had read Dressing with Dignity
Mhm.
at least 12 years ago, and had already adopted all of that. So that was a nice thing that we
The
were
Colleen
already.
Hammond,
Yes.
Colleen Hammond, yeah.
Yep. Yep. So we had done that. But, other than that, if we weren't farmers, you feel kind of landlocked as a farmer because
Hmm.
this is the land, you live off the land. If we weren't farmers, I think by now I would have pushed to move to a community somewhere that we could be, have daily mass, have a community and not feel so isolated,
Right.
because we're very blessed in having mass every week. That's absolutely huge. And I don't think most traditional Catholics get anything close to that.
Mhm.
But, if we could, like we went to Omaha last summer, if we could live somewhere with a community, with a church and events and, you know, sisters and a
Mhm.
school, things like that would be a goal. And, you never know what God has up his sleeve. But
Right.
at the moment, that doesn't seem to be in the cards.
Right. Right. Well, this has been awesome. Do you have any last words you want to put out? Any thoughts that you kind of had queued up that we didn't cover?
Let's see. Not really. I think my final remark would just be, if anyone would be watching that isn't already a traditional Catholic, it's not it's not what you think it is. Because I know what I thought it was. Uh, just because of the slander, it's got
Hmm.
such a good slander campaign against it.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was dissension and weird people and anger. And it wasn't at all. It was actually the exact opposite of all of those things. That's where I was. The R&R camp, that's the weird place to be.
Hmm.
That's the place of no peace. Um,
Right.
just to tell people that they really should look into it and meet some people. Not just look at it on paper, but meet the traditional people in real life, because they're
Hmm.
not what you think. I
Right.
haven't met one yet that I haven't liked. You know,
Hmm.
good Catholics. What could be better, right?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and for those who are, I think, to push your point that we're called to be salt and light, and we're called to evangelize and keep working on it, but uh, in the most charitable way possible, in a patient way. Like I said, I should be the best at that, because I needed patience myself, and I'm I'm kind of more like Ryan. I'm a little fiery, and I'm
Hmm.
not as calm and charitable as I could be. So, kind of put on your charitable hat and
Yeah.
get on Twitter and try to help people.
Yep, yep. I mean, you can make a difference in the world, and I think I found that you found that to me the most gratifying thing. You've been on long enough. You've probably seen this happen. That you'll have a discussion with somebody. It could have been 4 or 5 years ago, and they were slandering. They kind of hated your position, hated who you are, and then you see them come back 3 or 4 years later, and all of a sudden they're agreeing with you.
Yes,
And you're just like, hey, wait a minute, didn't we have a fight 3 or 4 years ago or something like that?
absolutely.
And it just doesn't get any better than that. And I think that it's a double-edged sword. It's such a rough environment, the social media, but there is such a potential to win souls out there that it's enticing. It's hard to stay out of.
Yes, I agree.
So, well,
Okay,
Martha,
so
thank you very much. This has been excellent, and we'll see if we can have you on for another show about dress or about something along the line, and have you on as a guest host. But I very much appreciate you coming on.
yes, thanks for having me. God bless.
Okay, God bless, and thank you very much.